Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Build an Accessory Dwelling Unit in the City of Heelsburg. Hola y bienvenido a nuestro seminario de web, Cómo construir un ADU en Heelsburg. This event is being simultaneously translated into Spanish. Este evento está siendo transmitido en vivo en español. And to access that feature, you can click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Para acceder a este servicio, favor de oprimir el botón abajo de su pantalla y seleccionar el botón para español. We thank Gabriel Gutierrez, who is offering our audience this live Spanish interpretation this evening. Le damos las gracias a Gabriel Gutierrez, quien nos brinda la interpretación al español esta tarde. And I'm going to go ahead and let Gabriel take the interpretation from here. For other Zoom logistics, we invite the audience to submit questions using the Q&A function available at the bottom of your screen. And questions are going to be tackled by all of the panelists at the end of the webinar, live with you. In addition, we'll be inviting you to answer various polls that we'll be launching over the course of the webinar. So get ready to interact with us throughout the next 90 minutes. Also, so that you know, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on demand on our website by next week. So thank you all once again for joining us. My name is Renee Champ and I'm the director of the Napa-Sonoma ADU Center. I'm a lawyer by education and a nonprofit leader by trade, and I'm a native of Sonoma County. I'm the first director of the new Napa-Sonoma ADU Center. I live in an above garage ADU myself, and I believe in a future where every person in Napa and Sonoma counties can afford to live and thrive here. I'm joined this evening by many wonderful folks who I'm going to be introducing to you throughout this evening. I do want to start by saying a special thank you to Amity, our admin support superwoman, who's taking care of all of the behind the scenes Zoom logistics for us this evening. So a little on our agenda. We're really excited to bring to all of you today's discussion that will offer resources and guidance on planning, permitting, and building ADUs directly from the City of Heelsburg's planning and building staff. For today's agenda, I'm going to share a little bit more about our nonprofit organization and ADUs. Then we're going to hear from our wonderful panelists from Heelsburg's planning and building divisions. And then we'll also leave time at the end for some questions from the audience. Before I dive into more of our content, I do want to just highlight that this webinar is part one of a two-part series focused on accessory dwelling units in Heelsburg. Today's webinar is in partnership with the City of Heelsburg, and as I mentioned, will feature your very own local planning and building staff. Part two of this webinar series is going to take place on Thursday, March 18th at the same time as tonight, 6 p.m. And that is in partnership with the local nonprofit Heelsburg 2040. That webinar is going to feature local housing professionals and homeowners who have successfully built accessory dwelling units in Heelsburg. Both webinars, again, will be recorded and available on our website on demand. And Amity has dropped a link for you to register for that March 18th webinar if you'd like right away, if you want to get more information that is not duplicative, but additive to the content of this evening. Okay, with that, I want to start off by hearing a little bit from all of you. I'd love to hear a little bit about your accessory dwelling unit goals. So if you could just take 30 seconds, you can scroll through these questions, click as many boxes as are relevant for you. We find a lot of folks have both short and long-term goals for their ADUs. Some of their goals are rental income, housing for a family member, helping out the community, housing for someone with special needs, planning for retirement, increased resale value for downsizing or moving into the ADU, housing domestic help, getting someone who can be around to help with chores or watch over things while you're away, and housing an in-home caregiver. So again, take a moment, read through, and we love getting data. We ask the same poll questions when we do webinars in various jurisdictions across Napa and Sonoma counties where we work. And we're aggregating that data so that we can get a better sense of homeowners across our communities. What are their short and long-term goals for building ADUs so that we can better help all of you with your ADU projects. When you're done selecting, you can just scroll to the very bottom there and then hit the submit button. Wonderful. So it looks like 77% of you and 22 of the 39 people had a chance to answer. So 77% of those are interested in housing for a family member. That's very common. We see that a lot. 55% interested in rental income. 50% planning for retirement. Very smart for retirement and aging in place planning. 27% interested in helping out the community. 23% interested in increased resale value for downsizing and moving into. Thank you all so much for completing that poll. It's really helpful for us to hear your thoughts there and hear your goals. So a little bit on the benefits of accessory dwelling units for homeowners. A lot of folks often say opportunities to keep their family together and build wealth as primary reasons for building an ADU. And some homeowners see ADUs as a source of rental income in the near term and a downsizing opportunity in the future that would allow them to rent out the primary dwelling for retirement income, as many of you indicated. There are so many good reasons to build an ADU, and if you're here with us this evening, you probably, as we've seen, already have your own very good reasons. But if you're interested, you can check out our website and our ADU workbook, which I'll talk more about later at page 7, to learn more about the various benefits of ADUs. So a little more about our nonprofit. The mission of our organization is to help homeowners build accessory dwelling units, and we work with homeowners across both Napa and Sonoma counties. Napa Sonoma ADU is a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County and others. And we've just formally launched with my hire this past April, so we're gearing up for our first anniversary. We really hit the ground running as an organization, and we have so much more that we're excited to do. We collaborate both with the local governments or jurisdictions across the 2 counties, including all of the cities and unincorporated county. We collaborate with other nonprofits and also with the private sector with a goal of ultimately increasing housing affordability in our community. So I want to hear a little bit more from all of you before I continue talking at you. So what part of the ADU project are you most looking forward to? Just like the last poll, you can click as many of the options here as you'd like, and then hit submit at the end. Are you interested in designing the floor plan for your ADU, selecting finishing materials, planning green or eco-friendly building elements, the landscaping around the ADU, interior decor once the build is complete, or really just excited to get that move-in piece going at the end of your project, whether that's a family member, a friend, yourself, or a tenant? Go ahead and take a moment to answer those poll questions, and I'll give you a second to do that. All right. Okay, so 27 of you completed the poll. 74% of those are excited about the move-in. That makes total sense. You're excited to get that project done. And so you're at the right place to get kickstarted on your project so you can get to that move-in goal. And then 37% of you were interested in selecting the finishing materials and also planning green and eco-friendly building elements. That's wonderful to see that percentage. That's higher than some of our other webinars, and I love to see it. A third of you interested in the landscaping piece. That's wonderful. And 44% interested in designing the floor plan. I recommend you check out our ADUs 101 webinar, which has a deeper dive into designing for small spaces that you might really enjoy. It's on demand on our website, and Amity will be sharing the link in a little bit. So before we continue, I want to make sure we all know what we're talking about when we talk about accessory dwelling units. So an ADU is a secondary dwelling unit with complete independent living facilities for 1 or more people. And ADUs are known by a lot of different names: granny flats, second units, backyard cottages, and more. And there are a lot of different types of ADUs, as you can see on this slide. I'm not going to walk through all of them. They're pretty self-explanatory, but we have more information on different types of ADUs, both in our ADU workbook and on our website. And then there's also, I just want to point out, a junior accessory dwelling unit. Under our new state laws that came out in January 2020, a lot of homeowners in California are eligible to build both an ADU as well as a junior ADU on their property. So we also have information about junior ADUs on our website, but in short, they're located within the existing walls of the primary residence, which can include within the walls of an existing attached garage. The owner has to occupy the rest of the house. The maximum size is 500 square feet. And there's a couple other elements, and you can check out, again, more information on that on our website or reach out to us if you're curious. So a little bit about the resources that we provide to homeowners to help them with their ADU projects. We have an ADU calculator tool, which I'll show you here in a second. We have a lot of webinars available on demand and all these other resources you see listed here. If you go to our website, www.napasonoma.adu.org, there's in the upper right-hand corner on the menu, it just says resources. There's a drop down there, has all of our key tools and resources. I highly recommend you check those out. And then a little bit about some of the key resources. I've already mentioned a couple times our ADU workbook. This is really great because it helps homeowners walk A to Z through the ADU planning, permitting, building, and rental process. Highly recommend checking that out. It's free, downloadable from our website. And then we also have an ADU calculator tool. So a lot of folks have a hard time getting an accurate, realistic understanding of what is an ADU likely to cost me. And so our calculator tool is specific to Napa and Sonoma counties. You go into that tool on our website, you can select what city or unincorporated county you're in, and it's going to help you understand not only the costs of the type of ADU that you want to build, but also the return on investment over time. So it's a really great tool, and I highly recommend checking that out. And then finally, our address lookup tool is an opportunity for you to identify if you're eligible to build on your property. Again, more often than not, the answer is yes. And then in a little bit, the planning department is going to talk to you about opportunities to also check in with the city before you get too far into your project to make sure that you're good to go before you get started and invest too much into that. A little bit more on what we provide to homeowners. So we have support for homeowners. You can reach out to us anytime. We have, again, on our website, a contact us button linked to here. And you can reach out to us there anytime with any of your ADU questions, and we will help you. We have close relationships with the planning and building divisions across the jurisdictions in Napa and Sonoma counties, and they also help us make sure to get you accurate information. And then we also provide more customized deeper dive support. So we have ADU Feasibility Consultations. There's detailed FAQs on this on our website, and you can see Amity's pasting links to all of the things I'm referencing in the chat there for you to access really easily. So the consults, you complete a quick questionnaire on our website. Then our ADU expert does pre-screening research on your parcel. If you want to meet him, his name is Scott Johnson. He's going to be joining us on the March 18th webinar for part 2 of this Heelsburg ADU webinar series. Again, highly recommend come and meet him. You'll get to ask questions of him directly at that time. And then if you do that, we do that pre-screening research, and then he'll hold an hour-long socially distant site visit with you outdoors on your parcel to really dive deep into site-specific characteristics of your parcel, your local ADU rules, cost drivers for your project, and then we'll send you a customized 20-page ADU feasibility report after that site visit that walks you through our recommended next steps and the professional team we recommend that you hire for your ADU project. We have a lot more services in the pipeline. Pretty soon, we're going to be launching a program called ADU Home Match, where we match ADU landlords with tenants. So please stay tuned, and we're excited to share even more resources that our organization has in the coming future. A little bit about the ADU process. We're going to be diving now into some more nitty-gritty of the process along with Heelsburg planning and building staff. And to give you a little bit of perspective, that means we're going to do a deep dive into the permitting and construction stages of the ADU process, which, as you can see on this map, come after the pre-development and design development stages. It's really good for homeowners to understand all of these stages a little bit up front, as it's going to inform your thinking during the first couple stages of the ADU process. Like I mentioned, our nonprofit offers homeowners help starting at that pre-development stage, so we can set you up for success from day one on your project. And then it's folks like staff at the city, along with your professional team, who's going to take it from there. We hand it off from there to ADU professionals, designers, architects, and builders. We have a vendor registry on our website that you can go to if you're curious. And that's where you take off onto the rest of your ADU journey. And with this in mind, I also just want to remind you that building an ADU contains all of the same complexities of building an entire home. It's just smaller than most houses. So unless you're converting already habitable space, like a part of your primary home, your ADU build is going to entail constructing a foundation, exterior and interior walls, a kitchen, a bathroom, and the plumbing, electrical, and all that other stuff that comes along with that. So unless you're doing an ADU build as an owner builder, and one of our panelists in the March 18th webinar is going to talk a little bit about his experience as an owner builder. But unless you're doing that, your professional team, like your designer or architect, general contractor, and others, should do most of the heavy lifting when it comes to the nitty-gritty details that we're about to go through. With that said, like I mentioned, it's really helpful for homeowners to understand these details going into a project to ensure that you're engaging with your professional team and with city staff as an empowered and knowledgeable consumer. So again, check out our ADU workbook if you want to do a little bit of a deeper dive as well. And with that, I'm going to stop talking at you and ask you a little bit more about your thinking. So I'd love to hear from all of you about your ADU concerns. Anyone going into a project as big as an accessory dwelling unit project is bound to have some concerns and anxieties about the build. So again, you can select as many options here as are applicable to you. Are you concerned about the cost, difficulty of permit approval, construction management, privacy, site constraints, renting and managing the ADU, conflict with neighbors, or scrutiny from the planning and permitting department? We hear a lot of folks with more than one concern, so feel free to click whichever ones are applicable to you, hit that submit button at the bottom. And I'll give you just a moment to complete it. Wonderful. 29 of you completed the poll of the 50 or so folks who are with us right now. Thank you so much. And it looks like of those 29, 72% are concerned about cost. That is oftentimes the biggest concern that folks have. Totally understandable. Again, our ADU calculator tool will really help you think through both the costs and also the return on investment over time. So definitely check that out. We also have a webinar that I'll mention more later, but it's on how to finance your ADU. Highly recommend you check that out on demand on our website as well. Almost 60% of you are concerned about the difficulty of permit approval. You're at the right place with that concern. We're going to talk about permit requirements on the webinar this evening with your city staff. And I think that they'll allay a lot of your concerns. Just over 50% of you are worried about site constraints. Our ADU feasibility consults are a really great way to walk you through and troubleshoot and problem solve with you creatively around any possible site constraints. And then 48% of you are worried about scrutiny from the planning and permitting department. People oftentimes cite that as a concern. I think you're going to really enjoy meeting our next panelist, Scott, who I think will allay some of those concerns as well. Some of you are worried about conflict with neighbors, totally understandable. Under the new state laws, as we're going to talk about more in a minute, ADU permit applications are approved with ministerial approval now under new state laws across all jurisdictions. And that means that there's no public hearing or anything like that where notice is given to your neighbors. With that, in general, what we recommend is check in with your neighbors in advance so that they're not caught by surprise, and you can communicate about the project and plan ahead together. But I hear that from a lot of folks. I want you to know you're not alone, and I think you'll be happy to hear about the ministerial approval. Okay, thank you all so much for completing the poll. And with that, I'd like to welcome and introduce Scott Dubin, Senior Planner with the City of Heelsburg. So Scott, you can bring up your video and unmute yourself. And Scott is going to walk us through some of the ADU rules and planning processes specific to the City of Heelsburg. Amity has shared his bio there on the screen. And with that, Scott, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Renee. And hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this webinar this evening. Before I get started, I'd like to introduce you to the planning side of the Planning and Building Department, which consists of Luke Sims, our Interim Community Development Director, myself, who serves as a Senior Planner, Jeff Fisher, an Assistant Planner, and Sean Sumter and Griselda Villarreal, who are Administrative Technicians with the Planning Division. We are a small team, but we managed to get a lot done, and we look forward to working with you should you ever decide to explore building an ADU on your own property. The Planning Division is responsible for overseeing and guiding development activities in the City of Heelsburg. Major activities include the administration of planning regulations through the implementation of the city's general plan, adopted specific plans, and the land use code. We're also responsible for conducting environmental review consistent with the California Environmental Quality Act, and providing staff assistance to the Planning Commission and the City Council on development-related permits and long-range planning. While our offices have been physically closed to the public since the start of the pandemic, we are working both at City Hall and remotely, and we remain available to help. The best way to contact us currently is by email or by phone. Our contact information is on our website, but you can also refer back to this slide. Our general email is planning@cityofheelsburg or at ci.heelsburg.ca.us. And our front counter phone number is 707-431-3346. As the pandemic eases, we look forward to the day when we can welcome you again in person to answer your questions and review your project ideas. ADUs have been increasing in popularity over the past few years, largely due to changes in state law that have progressively made it easier to build ADUs in California, as they're now recognized as a creative opportunity to support the growing housing needs across the state. With these changes, Heelsburg has experienced a steady upward trend in ADU construction. As shown in the slide, since 2016, the number of permitted ADUs in Heelsburg have increased significantly from 4 in 2016 to 16 in 2020. I'd like to highlight some of the new state laws that eased ADU regulations. These include a reduction in required setbacks, reduced parking standards, which the City of Heelsburg has reduced beyond the state's requirements, and limitations on the amount of development impact fees and utility connection fees that can be charged for ADUs. Heelsburg's development standards were updated to reflect these changes in state law in early 2020. And we are currently working on some additional updates to help clarify and simplify the city's ADU ordinance, which we plan to bring forward to the Planning Commission later this month. Next, I would like to touch on some of the specific regulations for accessory dwelling units in Heelsburg. Setbacks are the distance between the property line and the structure. For new construction of an ADU, the side and rear setbacks are 4 feet for a 1 or 2 story ADU. The setback from the front property line is defined by the base zoning district and typically ranges between 20 and 30 feet. To maximize privacy on adjacent properties, windows in an accessory dwelling unit that is located less than 10 feet from a rear or side property line are recommended to be clear-story windows or use frosted or obscured glass. It's also recommended that any balconies and doors should be oriented inward towards the existing units on the site as possible. And these privacy suggestions will be required in the next ADU update. With respect to size, the size limit for a detached or attached accessory dwelling unit in Heelsburg is 1,200 square feet. And with respect to height, an ADU cannot exceed 2 stories or 25 feet. To measure the height of an ADU, you look at the height of the structure as measured vertically from the average elevation of the natural grade of the ground covered by the ADU to the average height between the eaves and ridges of the roof. With respect to parking, there are no parking requirements for accessory dwelling units in Heelsburg. Additionally, if a garage or a carport is converted or demolished to create an ADU, the parking does not need to be replaced. With respect to lot coverage, accessory dwelling units up to 850 square feet are exempt from lot coverage requirements, while ADUs over 850 square feet are subject to lot coverage requirements. This exemption for smaller size ADUs allows smaller lots that previously could not support an ADU and still meet the lot coverage requirements now have the opportunity to construct an ADU. Lot coverage means the maximum area of a lot. It's expressed as a percentage of a lot's area that may be encumbered by structures over 30 inches in height, exclusive of eaves, cornices, and other such overhangs. And as an example, in an R16,000, which is a common lot size, typically that coverage is 30%. With regards to owner occupancy, the owner of a property with an ADU is not required to occupy either the primary residence or the accessory dwelling unit. In other words, both could be rented out. However, in the instance of a junior accessory dwelling unit, the owner of a property must occupy either the primary residence or the junior accessory dwelling unit. It's also important to note that accessory dwelling units in Heelsburg are not allowed to be rented for less than 30 days, or for example, as vacation rentals. In the next series of slides, I'll touch on the planning department aspects of the building permit process. The planning department will review the ADU permit as part of the overall building permit submittal. So that you know, the fire department will also review, often for whether sprinklers are going to be required or not. And for a small percentage, the engineering department will also look at your application. What the planning department specifically will look at during that comprehensive review process is your site plan, which illustrates the relationship of the accessory dwelling unit to the property with respect to setbacks, a floor plan that illustrates the interior layout of your ADU, elevations which illustrate the exterior size of your accessory dwelling unit, and the overall square footage of your ADU. We highly recommend that before you submit your ADU permit application, that you contact the planning department to go over your proposed ADU in advance. You can also drop off a simple sketch or plans in front of City Hall, submit via email to the planning division at the email address that I provided earlier, or even give us a phone call at the phone number I provided earlier. As Renee mentioned earlier, under state law, ADU permit applications that are full and complete, that means all the information has been provided that's required, they must be approved or denied within 60 days, and it's a ministerial approval, meaning there's no notice to your neighbors or hearing before the planning commission. We also highly encourage you to request a one-stop at the planning and building department before submitting your plans to receive preliminary feedback from all your city departments. This informal meeting also allows you to get your specific questions answered and receive feedback from city staff, including planning, building, fire, and public works, all in one meeting. One-stops are held on Thursday afternoons and are available at no cost to you. You don't need to have formal plans to schedule a one-stop meeting. A simple sketch will suffice, but obviously the more detail you have, the better we can provide feedback. And again, these are informal meetings and they've been highly productive, and we've gotten great feedback from folks that have taken advantage of that. It really kind of helps move this through the process a lot easier. During COVID, these one-stop meetings take place virtually. All you have to do is contact Griselda at the planning department at the number I provided earlier to schedule one. As an additional incentive to build accessory dwelling units, development impact fees have been reduced and or eliminated in some cases. For example, if your proposed ADU is 850 square feet or less, then there are no impact fees assessed. If your accessory dwelling unit is 851 square feet or greater, then the impact fees are proportional to the size of the primary unit, but in no case shall it be more than 50% of the primary unit rate. City staff can help you calculate your potential impact fees early in the process based on your preliminary proposal. It's also important to note that school fees are charged independently of the city and are currently around $3 per square foot for construction or additions of 500 square feet in size or more. Under 500 square feet is exempt. The school district collects this fee, and we just need a receipt indicating that they've been paid before your building permit is issued. This next slide shows a more detailed breakdown of fees for accessory dwelling units over 851 square feet. As you can see, the current cost for a single family dwelling which is in the first column, is around $27,000. The next two columns illustrate how accessory dwelling units are calculated proportionally to the size of the primary unit. Again, in no case shall it be more than 50% of the primary unit rate, or around $13,500, as you see in the third column. I should note that the streets and traffic fee and the storm drain fee have recently been increased by the City Council, and those will go in effect on July 1st of this year and are not reflected in these figures. But in the worst case scenario, would amount to probably around a $1,900 increase above the $13,500 that I quoted earlier. Moving forward, the City of Heelsburg looks to continue its collaboration with the Napa-Sonoma ADU Center to develop resources and streamlining tools and to offer support to property owners interested in constructing accessory dwelling units. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Renee. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. That was so helpful and informative. And I just want to say, I have the pleasure of working across, again, all 16 jurisdictions in Napa and Sonoma counties, and Heelsburg's one-stop opportunity where you get to meet with the city very early on in the process. The fact that Scott mentioned that they'll help you calculate your likely fees based on your preliminary plans, that's really huge. That's really huge and a wonderful opportunity. I highly suggest you take advantage of it. And I just want to say thank you to the city staff for doing that. It's really helpful with the ADU process. In particular, one of the challenges a lot of homeowners have with ADUs is there's so many different agencies within the city that have to weigh in on ADU decisions. So the fact that you get to meet with multiple agencies all at once is really helpful, can eliminate confusing different answers across agencies that can happen sometimes for homeowners. So that's great. Thank you, Scott. With that, let's bring on Steve Buffenbarger, the building official for the city of Heelsburg. So Steve, feel free to turn on your video and unmute yourself. We're really looking forward to hearing from you about the building process. So thank you for joining us. You'll see Steve's bio is pasted there in the chat. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Steve.
Well, thank you, Renee. Let's start with the building department staff. The Heelsburg Building Department is made up of these staff members: 2 permit technicians, Katrina and Griselda, who answer general questions and take applications and route plans and applications to other city departments for review and track the progress. We have 1 senior inspector, David Willoughby, who handles complex construction projects, over-the-counter rapid plan reviews, PV solar and energy storage systems, online permits, and city permit software integration and maintenance. 1 building inspector, Chris Kuntz, who handles the majority of daily inspections, answers inspection-related questions, resolves permits expiration problems, and performs permit maintenance. To contact us, you can email us at building@ci.heelsburg.ca.us or phone 707-431-3348 or 46. It goes to the same place. So starting the process, I can't stress enough how important it is to make a hand-drawn plot plan, and during shelter in place, send it via email and attend a one-stop WebEx meeting with the city before starting anything. Plans drawn by an experienced designer or professional are easier for us to review. It might save you both time and money overall. A good set of construction plans and documents is your contract with the builder. And I can't stress that enough, that that's your contract with the builder. You have a good set of plans. That's what he's supposed to build it to. It is best to leave as little room as possible for costly overruns or disputes regarding failure to perform. There are lots of good local building design professionals and contractors in Sonoma County, so be sure to carefully check their references before making any final decisions. Plan submittal requirements. Site plan. This plan shows an aerial view of your home, property lines, adjacent streets, properties, and setbacks. This plan is mainly for the planning division and engineering department. On this plan, it should clearly note exactly what is existing and what is proposed to be built. The floor plan clearly shows the interior of the building, walls to be removed, new walls, location of windows, doors, etc. These need to all be clearly noted on the plan. Again, as with the site plan, what is existing and what is proposed to be built should be clearly noted, and standard architectural symbols must be used, as well as standard plan content and layout. The foundation plan, this plan is required to show size, location of new foundations and footings for your project, as well as reinforcing steel, anchors, and hold downs. There's the roof framing plan. This plan clearly indicates the size of roof rafters and ceiling joists, which are often pre-manufactured roof trusses, roof slope, and roofing materials, and must be included on this plan. There's the floor framing plan. Plan clearly indicates the size and orientation of all floor and framing members, as well as the means of positive connection to load path between the roof diaphragm through the walls to the foundation elements. There's the plumbing, electrical, and mechanical plan, often included on the floor plan. It's referred to as the PME plan, shows the location of lights, switches, receptacles, service panels, plumbing fixtures, water heaters, furnace, vent ducts, bath fans, kitchen hood, all that stuff, all on the PME plan. There are cross sections. These drawings show the building's frame, usually done as a cutaway view, which clearly illustrates the ceiling heights, wall construction, the roof pitch. Insulation values and locations are also shown on these drawings. There's exterior elevation plans. These drawings show a side view of the building. Typically, these drawings show locations of doors, windows, chimneys, and they try to achieve a conceptual feeling for the project. There is the Cal Green mandatory residential checklist that needs to be turned in with any plans. This identifies a range of environmentally friendly and cost-efficient ways to reduce negative impacts and encourage sustainability construction practices. Energy calculations. These documents are required to be submitted with your building plans by the California Energy Commission. These documents are designed to verify the compliance of the structure, new or existing, to meet the state's energy requirements. It is recommended that a professional energy consultant be utilized for this stage of your project. Structural engineering plans and calculations. Engineering may be required. Structural design can be prepared by a qualified design professional, such as an architect or an engineer. Engineering calculations are to verify that the structural elements are adequately sized and connected at critical areas. Also, it's safe to assume that if your project is 2 stories or more, or has an open floor plan or lots of windows, engineering will be required. Basic key inspections. Some of the inspections will call for include underground utilities, which includes the sewer lines, water, gas, and electric. Foundation, which includes the size, reinforcement, hold down, bolts, and anchors. Underfloor inspections, which includes plumbing, electrical, mechanical, and insulation. Shear and sheathing, which is a structural inspection, checking the plywood type, nailing, connection of clips, straps, and hold downs at the interior and exterior walls, the floors, and roof. There's a close-in inspection, which includes framing, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, and fire sprinklers. At this inspection, we also get a look at the placement of the structural hardware, such as straps, hold downs, hangers, clips, and brackets. Installation of walls and ceilings. This is where we verify proper insulation placement, that installation's R value, and its air barrier. Wallboard fasteners and shower pans is another inspection. Here we check the wallboard thickness and fastener pattern, and the shower's design and waterproofing, including wall and shower pan. Then there's the building final. It's when we verify that everything is hooked up and working properly, and we collect the final construction documents, such as energy documents and the green building documents, and there's quite a few. Inspections are done over time throughout the course of the building process. The rule of thumb is don't cover anything until we've seen it. If in doubt, please call or send us an email and ask. Fire sprinklers is always a big topic. Here in Heelsburg, the determination of whether fire sprinklers will need to be installed is handled by the fire department. And in most cases, junior ADUs and attached ADUs will not require sprinklers. Energy, solar, and Cal Green requirements. Cal Green is required for any project that increases its conditioned volume, area, or size. The Energy Code designer will typically prepare the Cal Green documents. Energy Code compliance is required for all projects that can also typically can be completed by your design professional. There are mandatory measures, prescriptive measures, or performance measure options in order to obtain compliance. A new detached ADU does require solar PV in order to achieve Energy Code compliance. Again, that is a detached ADU will require solar PV. Photovoltaic, sorry. Common misconceptions. Conversions are always cheaper than new. This is not necessarily true. Conversions always lead to unforeseen issues. With conversions, you never know what you'll find until you open up walls or underfloor areas. Another misconception, plan review takes forever. Only talking about Heelsburg here, but we normally turn around plan checks for an ADU or JADU in 3 weeks or less, and normally plans drawn by a professional can pass through the process with fewer required corrections. The more corrections needed, the more time it takes to review the plans. One more misconception, building permits cost a fortune. As far as cost of permits go, it does depend on the project. But as an example, permits normally range between $5,000 for a $100,000 valuation project, and that includes plan check and the permit, which is the for the inspections, or for a $300,000 project, valuation project, that would be $8,000 for the permits. Permit fees pay for both the plan review time and specialized skills, as well as the building inspections. The building permit fees are separate from the fees that Scott mentioned earlier. Unpermitted ADUs. Typically, non-permitted structures are discovered through disgruntled tenants or neighborhood complaints. If you have an existing non-permitted ADU that you want to legalize, provide us with a set of plans as described earlier, and we can issue a retroactive permit to legitimize the ADU. Legalizing a non-permitted ADU is not simple or painless process, but it is a lot less expensive than building a new one. And now is a great time to do it. All health and safety hazards will need to be corrected, as well as being brought up to many of the current code standards within reason. We will help lead you through the process from start to finish, and good plans are essential. And with that, Renee, back to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Steve. That was really, really helpful, really straightforward and clear. I really appreciate it. And with that, some of you may have some questions that have come up while listening to Scott and Steve walk through this information. So I encourage you to take a moment now and start chatting your questions into the Q&A chat at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to dive into a live Q&A with Scott, Steve, and another panelist here in a minute. Before we do, I do want to make sure that you're all aware of where you can locate even more information from our nonprofit on ADUs. So I highly recommend that if you haven't already, you check out not just some of those tools that Amity dropped into the chat for you earlier, but also the ADUs 101 webinar I mentioned, which is available on demand. The Building ADUs in Napa and Sonoma Counties webinar, also available on demand, and that features local planners and building officials from a couple different jurisdictions across Napa and Sonoma counties. And then How to Finance Your ADU, which features multiple local finance experts and lenders and folks who can help you out with financing your ADU. And we also have a bunch of blog posts and FAQs available on our website as well as a vendor registry. So again, just to find all that information, go to the resources on our website at www.napasonoma.adu.org. And also Amity has helpfully pasted all of those links for you into the chat here. So again, continue submitting any of the questions that you have that have arisen over the course of this evening's presentations into that Q&A chat. And we're going to get to those shortly. Before we do, I just want to make sure that you're aware that we have a bunch of stories available from your neighbors in Napa and Sonoma counties who have already successfully built accessory dwelling units. So a lot of folks want to hear from other homeowners who have been through this process. Very smart. And they are really helpful. So we have a library of these stories. We have videos with the homeowners talking about their experience, photos of their completed ADUs, and also sample floor plans from their ADUs. So check those out. And then also wanted to just highlight in that ADUs 101 webinar I mentioned, we feature a local Santa Rosa homeowner who just finished a $100,000 garage conversion ADU, and she walks you through her experience doing that. And then again, as I mentioned, our upcoming webinar, we're going to talk about that as well. We're always holding new ADU webinars once or twice a month on average, and you can register for those easily on our website. All of the past webinars are available recorded on demand at the link on this slide. And then as a reminder, we would love for you to join us for part 2 of this ADU webinar series focused on Heelsburg. It's going to be really relevant for folks outside of Heelsburg as well, because it focuses on housing professionals and homeowners in Heelsburg who have successfully built ADUs here. It's going to be really interesting, and we hope you'll register for that today. Okay, before we dive into our live audience Q&A, we want to do one final poll with all of you. So we'd love to hear, what type of ADU do you think you're interested in building based on what you know so far? So is it a detached freestanding structure like a backyard cottage, an attached ADU that shares at least one wall with the primary home, an interior conversion built from existing converted space like an attic, a basement, or some other habitable space, a garage apartment, so a converted former garage space, an above garage ADU, like the one that I live in with my husband, 720 square feet. I recommend it, I really like it. Or a junior ADU, so that's conversion of interior space or an attached garage, no more than 500 square feet. And there's a couple other key elements to a junior ADU you can learn more about on our website. So go ahead and let us know which ADU type you're most interested in, and I'll share back everyone's responses here in a second. All right. So 27 of the over 50 people here with us this evening answered the poll. Thank you all so much. And 81% of you are interested in a detached ADU. And then 22% interested in an above garage. And then 15% interested in an attached ADU, 4% in a garage apartment or interior conversion, and 7% in a junior ADU. That's excellent. For those, again, interested in junior ADUs, we have a story highlighting a junior ADU in Sebastopol on our website. A wonderful woman named Marion who built it in order to be able to age in place. Highly recommend you check that story out. Okay, thank you all so much for sharing with us. We really love to hear from you. With this, we're going to dive into the moment that you've all been waiting for, our live audience Q&A. And so we're going to go ahead and remove the slides, and all of our panelists are going to turn on their videos and unmute themselves. And before we dive in, I want to introduce our final additional panelist with us this evening, Josh Abrams. He's a principal at the firm Baird and Driscoll Community Planning. He does a lot of really great work with our organization, including development of the tools that we've mentioned on our website. And he's doing work with us in partnership with all of the jurisdictions across Napa and Sonoma counties. And he is a statewide expert in ADU law and policy. So we're so grateful to have you with us. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining. Okay, with that, I have one pre-submitted audience question that I want to kickstart our conversation with. So here it goes. And this is going to be a question for either Scott or Steve, I believe. So here goes. I reside in Heelsburg and I share a private lane with 2 other houses. We are the top house with an access easement to our acre lot. To build an ADU, do we need legal approval from our 2 lower neighbors, or does the existing access easement to our acre lot home allow an ADU without their legal approval? So we kind of hit on this a little bit earlier. And there might be some very project specific questions that might require some follow-up information. But Scott or Steve, any thoughts to weigh in initially?
Yeah, I think on the surface, it shouldn't be a problem. You know, if you have your own private lot, any residentially zoned lot is entitled to build an ADU under California state law. The one thing you just need to make sure is that that ADU wouldn't be located within that easement or have a conflict of that sort. But otherwise, I don't think there'd be an issue. But again, you can always reach out to us with more detail and we can answer more affirmatively.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott.
I think also you have to talk to the fire marshal also, because oftentimes when you have more buildings on a single lane, you need to make your access road wider so they can access those with the fire truck. So please talk to the fire marshal about this project first off.
Josh, we can't
Yeah,
hear you, but I think you're saying something.
Oh, you can't hear me? Sorry.
Now we can.
Okay.
Now
The one nice thing with the new state laws is homeowners associations can no longer ban ADUs. They can put reasonable restrictions, which isn't defined. I know that wasn't exactly this question, but it's kind of a similar thing. So if your homeowners association says they don't allow ADUs, reach out to the ADU center and they can point you to that part of the law that in fact says they're not allowed to do that.
Thank you, Josh. That's really helpful. Thank you all. Okay, I have a question that actually I'd love to hear first from Josh on. What are the advantages of a prefab ADU versus custom built?
That's a great question. A lot of people are interested in prefab ADUs. I'm going to talk not so much manufactured homes. I'm going to talk about the modern, full, good quality construction prefab. A lot of people go in hoping that they'll be a little cheaper. That's sometimes the case. Sometimes they're a little cheaper, but that's not the biggest advantage. Sometimes with delivery, and then they also have a sales tax on them. Sometimes they end up being about the same price. So don't look for big savings in cost, but it definitely can be easier for you. It also can be faster. So you'll have fewer decisions. They'll take care of most of the work. They'll just drop it off your house. You won't have to find people. You'll lose some freedom in terms of customization. But if you can live with that, it might be a good option. And then also, there's not exactly a fine line between what's prefab and what's not. There's definitely things on one side that are definitely are and things that are definitely custom built. But a lot of times people will use roof trusses that are pre-built and trucked in, or sometimes whole walls, or sometimes it's part of the bathroom unit is modular and the rest is custom built. So it's not that the categories get meshed together. But I would just say, if you do your homework and you choose a good reputable prefab builder, there's very high quality options out there.
Excellent. Thank you. And I see Steve nodding. I was going to ask you, Steve, if you had anything else you wanted to add from a building official's perspective of what you've seen in Heelsburg.
Right, so the prefab is really good. They are inspected off-site out of the city somewhere by either a state agency or someone else. So they are inspected. We have to get verification on that. But then they do need to be set on a foundation, which needs to be designed, and the sewer hookups and the plumbing, the electrical, all that also needs to be in place, of course, before you set this box onto your foundation. But it does go often considerably faster than the stick build.
Yep, that's what I was going to say too on the timeline. That's really helpful. Thank you both. Okay, this is another question that actually I'd love to hear Josh weigh in on to start. I'm concerned about the increased number of cars parked everywhere when everyone builds an ADU. And I'll just start by saying that I've spoken with folks up in Portland, Oregon about this concern, because Portland is a city in the US that has, I think, the highest number of ADUs. And when people hear that most properties are eligible to build an ADU on them under the new state laws, some people get anxious. We're going to double the housing, which would be great for people who don't have homes, of course, and for our housing crisis. But what we see in reality is it's not something where there's going to be such a high volume of ADUs that this really becomes an issue. But I'd love to hear if Josh has anything to add, or if you have any disagreement on that piece, Josh.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think parking is a legitimate concern for a lot of people, but I don't think ADUs will drive challenges in parking and traffic in the future. It's just, if we were as successful as the most successful part of the country in promoting ADUs, our population would grow a couple percent because of ADUs. And it would help, it would reduce housing prices, and it would give a lot of people housing options. There would be a lot of good, but ADUs alone are neither going to meet all our housing needs nor make a significant dent in traffic and parking. So I think I just don't think there's enough units that are ever going to get built for that to be the case. And then I would just say my experience is most people, homeowners, are more likely to be long distance commuters. Not always the case, but a lot of times we see the ADU owners being families, so they're not driving distances. Sometimes they're domestic help, so that actually reduces traffic. And a lot of times the people who are interested in living in a community in an ADU are people who actually work there already. So maybe a homeowner is willing to be a little further out to buy a bigger home, but the ADU owner, they just want to be in the community either because they have family there, they grew up there, or because they work there. So it's probably not going to have the same number of traffic generation per housing unit as, say, a new single family home.
I'm so glad you raised the traffic issue, Josh, because one of the things we see due to the housing crisis in Napa and in Sonoma counties is that in Sonoma County, over 30% of the people who work in Sonoma County actually have to commute into the county from out of the county because they can't afford to live here because of our housing crisis. And so building ADUs can actually reduce traffic when it comes to thinking about environmental concerns. So that's a helpful ancillary piece. Okay, we have some less macro questions and more nitty-gritty questions that I want to direct to Scott and Steve. First question, and I think this will be a Scott question. Can a portion of a garage be used as part of a junior ADU in Heelsburg?
Yes, they can. It just needs to be within existing space. And then, of course, building is going to look at how that conversion is done to make sure that it's habitable space. But yes, you can do that.
And it has to be an attached garage, correct?
Correct.
Can you tell us, how does Heelsburg define attached? So some cities define attached by a deck counts as attached, or by a trellis. You know, it depends across the jurisdiction. Do you know how Heelsburg defines attached?
You know, it's not something that's defined in the land use code. I know that buildings looked at that in terms of proximity, for example. If it's connected, I think want to say we've done a zoning interpretation on that. And if it's a deck, but it also has a roof, so it's kind of a covered connection, then that would be considered attached.
Excellent. Okay, great. So I feel like probably good to check in with you to confirm before making any plans, but that's really helpful. Thank you, Scott. Okay, next question. Is my ADU automatically considered a junior ADU if it's only 430 square feet? It will sit on top of the garage. So I think that's a you question, Scott.
Yeah, I think I would just consider that to be an ADU. There's no additional regulation or oversight associated with it or fees associated with it by being an ADU versus a junior ADU. And it really, the main difference is that the junior ADU typically has a little bit less infrastructure inside. It's more of an efficiency kitchen rather than a full-blown kitchen. But yeah, I mean, its size isn't an issue there.
That's
Josh, you have a point?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna add on, usually it's the homeowner, in a lot of cases, the homeowner could choose to call it a JADU or an ADU. There's some things that can only be a JADU, there's some things that can only be an ADU, and then there's a number in the middle that could be either. And usually it's in the homeowner's interest to call it an ADU, because then they don't have, JADUs have owner occupancy rules on them and regular ADUs don't. So, but in reality, there's not gonna be too many other differences if it meets the size and the kitchen rules and all that.
Yeah, it's helpful to note that owner occupancy requirement, which only exists for junior ADUs. And in this case, it will be sitting on top of the garage. And so it sounds like it's also not being built out of existing space, which is what a junior ADU is. So great question, thank you. Okay, someone has a question. This is for Scott about the school fees. The chart said less than 500 square feet requires school fees. I think that's not what the chart said. But can you just clarify about the school fees and the square footage?
Yeah, less than 500 square feet is exempt. And I went back and looked at the slide. And I think you're right. The greater than and less than symbols were incorrect on that. So our apologies.
Oh, perfect. Well then, thank you for noting that. That's really helpful. Okay.
Right, but to be clear on the school fees, if it's 501 square feet, you're paying for 501 square feet. You're not paying for 1 square foot.
That is a really helpful point of clarification. Thank you, Steve.
And that applies to all school districts. It's a state law that doesn't let them charge it for under 500 feet.
Super helpful. Thank you. Okay. Another really great question on fees here. Are the fees charged for ADUs that are greater than 850 square feet based on the quote existing size of main residence, or just some clarification on that piece?
Yes, those are recently updated and it's proportional to the existing. So, and I'm sorry, I went over that slide relatively quickly during the presentation, but the example is, so for example, if you had a 2,000 square foot existing unit and you built a 1,000 square foot ADU, then that ratio is 0.5. So you pay 50% of the single family rate. The other example that was on that slide was an 851 square foot accessory dwelling unit. So 1 foot over the exempted size with a 2,000 square foot primary unit. That ends up being 43% of the size of the primary unit. So the fees would be 43% as opposed to 50% in the previous example. So the less the proportion you are, the less of the overall fee you'll pay. But if your ADU, for example, was 1,200 square feet and the primary unit was 2,000, you're going to end up with a greater than 50%, but the fee will be capped at 50%. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Thank you so much, Scott. Okay. And just a reminder, right? You said that the city will help people calculate their estimated fees up front early on in the process. So that is huge.
Absolutely. And we'll typically try and do that even as part of the one-stop. So if we know what the size of the existing unit is and we know what the size of the proposed ADU is, then we would come into that meeting with an estimate of fees.
Wonderful. That's great. Okay, I have a question. This might be a question for the fire department, who's not with us this evening, but we can at least have Josh speak perhaps to the state law on this, unless Steve wants to weigh in. Does a detached ADU require sprinklers? And I know it's going to probably be a little bit of depending on the project, but first, Steve, do you want to weigh in on that, or is that something that folks should go to the fire department with?
They need to talk to the fire department about it. Yes,
Yep.
they wrote that ordinance, they interpret that ordinance, and they enforce that ordinance. So
Yep.
I try to stay out of that portion of it.
And if the fire department is a part of that one-stop meeting, will they talk to homeowners? in the one-
Absolutely.
Great, that's awesome.
I think in the detached ADU, you should be prepared to install sprinklers.
Okay, that's helpful. Josh, do you want to provide some background on the state law on that? I really want to just caveat that with what's going to end up really being pertinent for folks is the local rule. So again, that one stop with the fire department is going to be key. But anything you can add, Josh, on that?
Yeah, I'll just add what state law says is if the main house doesn't have sprinklers, the ADU doesn't need to have sprinklers. So that seems pretty straightforward. Sometimes you'll do so much work on a property, any type of renovation on a property or any type of addition that'll trigger rules that the main house will need to be sprinkled, and then that would mean the ADU. You know, there's a minority of fire officials who have a different interpretation of that law. And I don't want to get, I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to get into telling people the standard interpretation is that if the main house isn't sprinkled, the ADU doesn't need to be sprinkled, and a few fire marshals interpret that differently.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
That's correct. I can just add to that a little bit, just based on experience with our fire marshal and looking at different projects. She, of course, always encourages people to sprinkler just because it's a smart, safe thing to do. But there's situations where I agree with the interpretation of state law. But for example, because ADUs, especially detached ones, are often behind the main house, if they're located a certain distance away from the closest fire hydrant, then that would trigger sprinklers even though the main unit doesn't have sprinklers. And another example is often if you're doing an ADU on top of a garage and the square footage of that crosses a certain threshold, then that would trigger sprinklers for the ADU because that structure is over a certain size. So again, Linda's always available, Linda Collister, our fire marshal, and always part of those one stops, so we can always get you answers to those questions. But those are some examples to help you out with that.
That's so helpful, Scott. And again, it's so great that Heelsburg has that one-stop opportunity because fire sprinklers can be costly, and getting that information on the front end to the extent possible is so helpful. So thank you. Okay, so is there a daylight plane requirement for ADUs that sit on top of a garage?
You want to define that to start?
What was that, Josh?
Do you want to offer a definition, or Steve or Scott, do you want to offer a definition too, in case people don't know what it is?
I don't have a definition. I'm making the assumption that that's referring to shade on the adjacent property, in which case we don't. We have the height limit. We certainly encourage people to try and orient their ADU to provide both privacy and, to the extent that they can, to reduce the amount of shadow. That can be handled, of course, by the orientation of the roof. But I'm assuming that that's what that's referring to, but I'm not familiar with that term.
Thank you. Okay. This is a question, this might be a Scott question. I have a permitted second kitchen that I use for cooking classes. Would the city of Heelsburg still have those plans on file if it was built in 1999? Would this reduce the cost? It has plumbing for a half bath, but not installed. I'm assuming this person means, would having this in existence reduce the cost if I converted this into an ADU?
I think that might be more of a Steve question.
Yeah, we very possibly have plans for that. I don't know about reducing the, I didn't quite follow that part of the question. It's possibly reduce your design costs if you have existing condition plans. If you
Maybe
could,
they were asking about fees, like if there would be a reduced cost in fees. And I'm assuming the answer is, well, I don't want to assume. Maybe because they already have a kitchen that is permitted.
so if they want to wall off that portion of the building and now they have an ADU and a main dwelling, sure, that's one less, $35,000 worth of kitchen perhaps. So, yeah.
Great.
From an impact fee perspective, where that's based on square footage and not necessarily the improvements that you have existing within the unit already. So
That's a helpful distinction, Scott. This sounds like a perfect example for a one-stop meeting or just contacting you.
Renee,
Yes.
can I just add one thing, which is often, well, the most expensive parts of a house or an ADU are the kitchen and the bathrooms. So if you got the kitchen and the bathroom plumbing in, that's great. It's going to make your life much easier. It's why interior conversions ADUs are so much cheaper than, I know a lot of people said they were thinking about new detached, but if you've got a lot of that work done already, you're going to knock your construction cost down a huge amount. And the other thing is to keep in mind when you're often, if you want to make your ADU a little larger, the construction cost per square foot will usually go down because it's to add a second bedroom is not nearly as much as adding that kitchen and bath.
Yep, that's great. Thank you for that, Josh. Okay, I think I can answer the next question, which is just, I live in the county, although my address is Heelsburg. Same ADU rules apply. The answer is no. So if you live in unpermitted Sonoma County, even if your address is Heelsburg, your jurisdiction is unincorporated Sonoma County, not unpermitted.
That's its nickname, actually.
So the answer for this homeowner is if you live outside of the city limits of Heelsburg, then your jurisdiction is unincorporated Sonoma County. And we've already done this exact webinar with planners and building officials from Permit Sonoma. You can find that webinar on demand on our website. So I highly recommend you check it out. Just so that you know that local ADU rules in Sonoma County as of now, if you're in unincorporated county, are actually identical to the state laws on ADUs. All right.
And also the building codes are uniform. They strive to be uniform. So much of the county's building code requirements are the same as Heelsburg.
That's a great point, Steve. Okay. Oh, this is a great question. I'm unclear on the turnaround time for a complete application. I thought I heard Scott say state law stipulates that a complete application must be acted upon within 6 days. It's actually 60 days under the state law. But then this person thought maybe Steve said the building plan check would take much longer than that. Okay, so yes, can we just get clarity? We know that the permit application, if it's a full and complete application, must be turned around within 60 days. But how does that look in terms of timeline with the city of Heelsburg?
For building permit, it's 15 days in review. That's what we shoot for. Right now, we're extremely busy, but we're still turning these around within that timeline. Now, that doesn't mean once it gets back in your hands that it's going to be, then the time, it's up to you to obviously address those comments and get them back to us. But when they're in our hands, we try to turn them around very quickly.
That's really helpful, Steve. Thank you. Okay, a follow-up question on the fee slide, which I think you might have covered, Scott, but let's just make sure. The fee slide references fees with a 2,000 square foot primary unit. Does the size of the existing main residence matter?
It does, because that's what it's going to be based on. So if you had a 2,400 square foot unit and you built a 1,200 square foot ADU, then you're going to be 50% of the single family rate.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Scott. Okay, let's see here. Okay.
While you're looking through those, just to kind of articulate that a little bit more, I think the state law requires that that cities exempt ADUs that are 750 square feet or less from fees. Heelsburg City Council wanted to go a little bit further and increase that to 850, so it's a little bit more generous. And then state law also recently dictates that those that are larger than that size then need to be proportional to a typical single family. And that's why we have this new calculation. So I know it's a little bit confusing, but it's our best attempt to address state law.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Scott. Okay. Here's a question on front setbacks. A front yard setback was listed as 20 to 30 feet. How do you know if your property needs 20 or 30 feet?
You just give us planners a call and we'll look up your property, figure out what zone it's in, and we can look up the setbacks for you.
Great. Here's another setback question. What is the minimum setback required for a stairway to access the ADU, for example, in the side setbacks? So can a stairway impede into the minimum side setbacks, I guess is the question.
Well, that's actually both a building code and a planning question or zoning code question. If that's the only access to the unit, it'll need to be 5 feet away, or just because of fire safety, you can't exit into that side yard. Now, if it has a street, of course, or a corner parcel, you can be right on that property line as far as building code is concerned. But otherwise, you need to be able to get out of that building without getting that close to your neighbor's property.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Okay. I have a question directed to Napa Sonoma ADU. Building material costs have been skyrocketing recently. That is true. As an owner builder, does your organization provide the option of collective purchasing power for better pricing? That is such a great question. The answer is we don't do that as of now. We are piloting, trying to bring together in the cities of Napa and Santa Rosa, homeowners who are doing ADU projects in Facebook support groups that we've developed to see if homeowners that are at the same stage of their projects could come together to, for example, do some like what we saw really successfully after the Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa, where folks in the same neighborhood hired the same design build firm and were able with their collective purchasing power to make it more affordable to do those builds and also just build in efficiencies of scale with those firms. So the answer is no, but we're working on kind of experimenting with trying to bring folks together collectively to improve your purchasing power. Thanks for that question.
Renee, can I just do a little shout out that the ADU Center didn't even exist about a year ago, and Renee's done wonderful things, like to look at all of the services they're providing and everything that's happened from like not existing really recently. So that's a good idea. It should be on the wish list of projects, but I'm just so impressed with the amount of things that are even going on in this short amount of time.
Oh, thanks so much, Josh. And a lot of it is thanks to your team. So we, always are thinking about how can we innovate and how can we push the envelope to make ADUs easier for homeowners to build. But thank you, Josh. It's nice to hear that. And I also am so glad that we're looking at all the new ways that we can continue to improve the ease of building ADUs here. Okay, this is a specific question. I want to build an ADU on top of a detached garage. The garage is on a slab and looks to be on 6-inch footings. Do I need to tear down the existing garage and rebuild to include 8-inch footings, or can I do something to increase the structural integrity that supports the ADU? Steve, do you have any thoughts on that, or would this be something that you'd want to look into more deeply?
No, well, your architect or engineer would design it because, it's not just that we're in fire, flood, and pandemic country. What drives us is seismic. This is earthquake country, and you really have to make sure that those seismic loads, those forces go down to those footings, and they have to be adequately sized to support that structure. So.
Great, that's really helpful. Thank you, Steve. Okay, I have a few questions here from one person. So the first question is, how much will my property taxes increase if I build an ADU? So just in short, adding an ADU will affect your property taxes as well as the resale value of your home. Your primary house won't be reassessed, and your property taxes will only increase based on the added value of your ADU. So if you have low property taxes because you've owned your home for many years, your base assessment won't be affected, and the assessor will only review the value of the improvement. So for example, if a new home buyer would pay $150,000 more for your property because of your ADU, and your property tax rate is 1.1%, your taxes will increase by 1.1% times $150,000. So that would be $1,650 per year. Plus you'll continue to pay what you were already paying before. If you want more information on this, we've actually interviewed the Napa County Assessor's Office and the Sonoma County Assessor's Office to get more detailed and specific information on this. And it's available in a blog post on our website. So feel free to check that out. And then I should also just note that interior conversions or junior ADUs are going to have much less, or in some case, no effect on your taxes. Josh, do you have anything that you would add to that in general, or do you think that pretty much sums it up? Great. Okay, this is another really good question. And Josh, you might have thoughts, or Scott, maybe. Are there other homeowner restrictions that occur once an ADU is built? Like what we mentioned about the owner occupancy requirement for a junior ADU?
No, we do require with a new ADU that you record a deed restriction that basically just acknowledges that you cannot sell that ADU separate from your existing home in that property, and also that you cannot use it as a vacation rental.
That's really
it needs to be more than a 30-day rental.
Yes. So to clarify, the city doesn't limit you renting your ADU as a vacation rental if it's being rented at least 30 days or more at a time, right?
Correct. It needs to be a long-term rental. And
right.
So yes, you could use Airbnb or VRBO as a platform for, a long-term rental. It just cannot be used for, nightly, weekends, weeks, 28-day rentals.
Exactly. Great. Thank you, Scott. Okay. What kind of triggers may we run into with an ADU project, i.e. sewer lateral improvements?
Anytime in the city of Heelsburg, anytime your permit valuation exceeds $25,000 or is $25,000 or more, you need to test the sewer lateral, which means you run a video camera or have your plumber run a video camera through it, checking it for leaks and sags and breaks. And then if there are found to be problems in that sewer, you're going to have to fix it.
Super helpful, Steve. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you think would be relevant to raise?
Well, we talked about the fire sprinkler triggers, but yeah, those are the kind of two local ordinances that we talk about in our one-stop meetings always.
Great, thank you. Okay, and I think we can get to a couple more questions here. How do you determine if you can build both a junior ADU and an ADU? And I will say that our address lookup tool on our website will give you a preliminary answer to that question. But does the city have anything that you would add to that?
I believe that ADU needs to be, into the ADU detached or as new construction, and then the junior accessory dwelling unit needs to be within the existing structure.
Great, thanks. Okay. On a garage conversion, how do we reconcile simply sealing an existing concrete floor, such as with epoxy paint, and what the energy code requires?
Yeah, it's not the energy code that's talking about the slab. It really is, what is under that slab? How is that slab constructed? I've seen and had to do a lot of enforcement on substandard housing, And a lot of times when there's mushrooms growing through that slab, you know that there's a problem. And that's really what you want to avoid altogether. So water intrusion is huge. If it's coming up through the slab, you do what you can, of course, and hopefully it'll work. Then there's also the stem walls that older garage floors don't have. So if there's a little bit of a water rise on the outside of the building, well, it just flows up over the slab and into under the sill plates. So those can be real problems for the garage conversion.
That's really helpful. Okay, great. Let's see here. One final question. Can you get an investor to help with construction cost? What I would just say is check out our How to Finance an ADU. That's an on-demand recorded webinar on our website to get more information on ADU financing, unless anyone else wants to add anything to that.
If I could just add a few words, Renee, there's a lot of creative ways that people finance their ADUs. It's sometimes a mix of a bunch of things, some personal savings, some money from family if family's moving in, a loan from the bank if you have equity or if they're eligible. There's a few services now where there's private equity money or they rent your backyard in exchange for a percentage of it. Be cautious of those. They might meet your needs, but those are lightly regulated, and historically those have been a little predatory. So just if you're going to go that unusual route, really make sure you have someone who knows finances very well. Review the details of what you're agreeing to.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh. Okay, that concludes the Q&A portion. I want to share a little bit, a couple final words with all of you. So Amity's going to pull up our slides, but thank you to our panelists. I want to remind everyone that our nonprofit is here to help you with your ADU questions. So reach out to us via our Contact Us button that I've linked to there on this slide, or via phone. Visit our website to learn about other upcoming webinars. Again, register for our March 18th webinar, also in the city of Heelsburg, talking to local ADU housing professionals and homeowners who have successfully built in the city of Heelsburg. And make sure that you stay in touch with us and with the city, because rules change over time. So it's always important to make sure that you get information specific to your individual parcel and your individual ADU plans in real time. And then a necessary disclaimer: everything we've shared with you here today is information, not advice specific to your ADU project. An ADU feasibility consult that's customized with our team is highly recommended, as is that one-stop meeting with the city. So it's helpful to do that consult with us first and then go straight to that one stop with the city. I want to also just take a moment to thank our supporters once again. Napa Sonoma ADU is a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation, Sonoma County, and others. And we're so grateful to the city of Heelsburg for partnering with us to bring you this very helpful, detailed information on ADUs in Hillsburg. So thank you all once again. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who joined us, the over 50 people who joined us in Heelsburg this evening. We really hope this was an informative experience for you. We're excited to meet you and help you kickstart your ADU project. So again, please reach out. And we just ask, as we close up this webinar, that there's an anonymous survey that's going to pop up. We'd love for you to give us feedback on the webinar experience. We're constantly working to improve our services. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you all so much once again. Have a lovely evening.